Hey, what is up guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be showing you the best drift cars in my opinion. Disclaimer, all of these cars are lowered. If you don't know how to lower your car, I'll leave a video in the description. And these are all cars that drift well, so it doesn't particularly have to look like a drift car, but I'm just talking about drifting in GTA. So hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Let's get started. Now the Turismo Classic, if you're going to just jump into this car straight away from not drifting anything else, you're gonna have a very hard time. This is one of those cars that you can double clutch and drift, but right at the end of a drift you'll find that the car will be really twitchy. You'll see it a lot. It will either grip up or it will become really twitchy. As you can see in the clips that I've took, you can see it kind of straight away straighten out, if that makes any sense, right at the end of a drift. But I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 because just look how nice it looks drifting. I know it's not the car to do so, but the way it looks, I mean, it looks pretty cool drifting. Now the Buccaneer. The Buccaneer by far is the easiest car on this list to drift, and this is why I'm going to rate it so high. I'm going to rate it at 8.7 out of 10. I mean, when you're drifting this thing, it's so smooth. There's no inconsistent like twitches or anything. It just slides so smoothly, and you'll feel it when you drive it as well, the satisfaction you get out of it. And it's not unpredictable either. You can, once you do like a few turns in the car, you can tell where it's going to go in a drift. It is a low to medium range drift car. It can do street corners well, but maybe not so much on the long stretches. Now the Comet Retro. The Comet Retro, if you don't own it already, you probably should own if it could drift or not. But this is a great car with lots of modifications, and yeah, it wheel spins a lot when you don't lower it, but when you lower it, it spends most of its time wheel spinning. Now I would say it's a medium range drift car, and again, this is one of those cars where you can drift this car, but it's very prone to like spinning out. You will easily spin out in this car. There's more spinning out than there is kind of completing a full drift, unless you spend a long time practicing with this car. I would rate this as 6.5 out of 10 just because the amount of practice you need. You probably need to spend a good couple of days just practicing this car to get it right. Other than that, it looks great and it does drift great if you know what you're doing. Now the Futo, the OG drift car. I think if not everyone has kind of drifted this car before, but when you go back to it from driving, you know, Banshee 900Rs and other cars that are a lot more powered, this car definitely feels like you're more pulling the handbrake than wheel spinning. I mean, honestly, there's no issue with tapping on the handbrake. I don't know why people get so upset about it. I mean, a lot of low powered drift cars in real life actually use the handbrake a lot more, but you definitely have a lot less of the element of slidiness. When you pull the handbrake and you drift, it doesn't drift for that long and ends up coming to a halt straight away or slowing right down. I give the Futo a 6.5 out of 10. I give the Futo a 6.5 out of 10. I would have rated it lower, but it is very easy for newcomers to drift. And you know, if you like drifting but you really don't have the GTA skill, which is not an important thing, then you can drift this car. Now the Banshee 900R. Now this is the only car on this list or in GTA that you can actually drift for so long and also slide for so long, meaning from cutting a drift short to making it a lot longer so you actually make it. It's actually chosen by many people. Many people find this the best drift car in the game, and there's a lot of drifting crews that rely on the Banshee 900R. There's a lot of modifications on it that actually make it better to drift. I joined a drift crew and I realized that they're really serious with the spoiler and the front bumper, the back bumper, all these mods that they put on it to actually change the drifting style. And trust me, they've been doing it for many years and they know that it definitely makes a difference when you change those. So I would say in the community's eyes, this is number one. It's not my number one, but everyone else does see this as a number one drift car. And if you can't drift it, you will be able to drift it if you just practice long enough and you learn how to double clutch. I never used to be able to drift this car, but now I'd say I'm pretty good at it. So I'm definitely going to put a 9 out of 10 on this. Once you get used to it, you'll find this car really satisfying and fun to drift. Let me know if I should make a kind of a drift tutorial. I know there's loads already out there on YouTube, but I'll try and make mine really simple, and you know how I kind of transformed into not being able to drift this car at all to actually being okay at it. So next up is the Hellfire. As you see from this clip, the Hellfire's rear wheels are always spinning, but you kind of have to force it to kind of drift, so you need to force it to turn. With power and torque, you know, it's definitely there. It's just that this car needs a bit of help going sideways. You know, it rather go in a straight line. And I think that's cool, really cool and realistic as well. You can just see in this clip that this car wants to go straight. It doesn't want to go around corners. But probably a 4.5 out of this. The car definitely doesn't like being drifted, but it's so satisfying when you do so.
Chuki Beats.
Now, probably the hardest car to drift. So a lot of you would notice this has a lot of low down torque. And when you're drifting it, it's kind of the same. It has a lot of torque, and at the same time, if you let go of the throttle, it straightens up so quickly. So it has a lot of grip. It's a very twitchy car, and honestly you can really pull off some good drifts with this car, but it's gonna take you some time. It's one of those where you're turning the analog to correct it, but you need to make sure when you're correcting it you're not over correcting it or under correcting it. But yeah, as you see, you can still drift it. I give this car a 5.5 out of 10. You know, it's really hard to drift, but once you do get used to it, you may be able to pull it off. Now the Picador, the car with probably the least amount of power on this list, but it's really unique. This car is actually a pickup which is all-wheel drive. It's rear biased and it has very low power. So how does it drift? Well, this is another one where I feel like it comes from momentum. When you drive it, you will feel like the weight's at the back of the vehicle, but it's just so smooth and so predictable once you start drifting it. But the reason I even put it on this list is just because it's so unique. So I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. It doesn't hold the best drifts. You know, you can't do any long drifts. It's more of a first gear kind of drift unless you yank the handbrake in second gear. I know I'm not rating any of these cars on looking like a drift car and drifting, but if there's any car that looks closest to, you know, a beta drift car, then it's this, the Nebula Turbo. You know, I feel like you could go in a public session, start drifting, and people will understand what you're doing just because of what the car looks like. But another really smooth car at drifting. It does feel a bit back heavy, and I feel like that helps a lot with the slides. But it is a car that kind of needs a lot of momentum when you're pushing it around the corner. Once it has that momentum, it can do pretty cool slides. You do see in some of these clips as well where like it will just not have enough power to kind of come out of the drift. I think this definitely deserves a 7.2 out of 10. It looks amazing, but it could do with a slight bit more power. Now the Rapid GT. In my opinion, this is the #1 best car to drift. Why, you may ask? If you guys take 20 minutes just to practice the Rapid GT, you do need to double clutch a lot, unfortunately. But you're just able to do long drifts. No matter where the slide is, if you just double clutch and then continuously double clutch, you can carry on drifting. And it is very similar to the Banshee, but with the Banshee, at the end of the double clutch, it becomes a bit twitchy, where you can easily spin out or easily overcorrect. And this car is just like a sliding object. You can just control it and keep the same angle no matter how long the drift is. That's why I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10, but it just doesn't seem like the easiest car to drift. You do get tired of double clutching it 24/7. Now the Fusilade, another car that's quite easy to drift and easy for newcomers. Unfortunately, it is kind of a low to medium range drift car. It reminds me a lot of the Schwatzer, but obviously the Schwatzer looks a lot better than the Fusilade in my opinion. But you'll tell with this car, if you're really bad at drifting, I'd probably give this a solid 7 out of 10. It's really good at drifting, but there's no modifications on the car, and unfortunately it can't hold long drifts. Now the Schwatzer, one of two OG cars to drift. It's between this and the Futo. Now the Schwatzer is really good for medium range. You can double clutch and you can tap the handbrake. So it makes it easy for the pros and the people that are just getting started. You can really make the car a kind of a drift spec. And there's no going wrong with it because it's so cheap and you can get it off the street. I'm giving this car an 8 out of 10.